All right, folks, Eddie from Totally Wired Guitars here, and today we're talking about this custom-built black Johnny Marr style Jaguar. Now, this is very similar to the other ones that I've built in the past. It's a fairly good weight, 7.9 pounds on this one. Typical specs that I've used before on these, and this is considered to be a budget build. And today I wanted to break down what that actually entails, whether you buy one from me or whether you decide to build one on your own. Now, I call them budget builds because it's not only quicker and easier to source these parts, but it's also easier for me as the tech or the builder of these guitars because all of the stuff is already prefab. The finish is done. All of the mounting holes for the hardware, right? It's totally compatible with more premium Fender parts. And everything for the most part is drop in with the exception of the neck. And on this particular guitar, I did have to shape and file down the nut. And I also had to press fit the bushings for the tuners on this thing because I wanted to use a more premium quality set of tuners. So let's go over the specs very quickly. This is a black classic vibe 70s Jaguar body. This is poplar. I believe it was 4 pounds 3 ounces when I got it, and that's why we are coming in at under 8 pounds for the total build. If you're trying to build a Jaguar, and this one's already a bit lighter because it's missing the full rhythm circuit, want it to come in under 8 pounds, look for a body that is 4.3 pounds or less, okay? Secondly, we've got this Japanese made nitro finished neck, 7 1/4 radius, dark rosewood fretboard. This has a new bone or Graphtec nut, right? Just like Johnny Marr's. Johnny Marr is vegan, so he has a synthetic bone nut on his, and this is basically the same kind of thing. And this was hand-shaped, hand-slotted for 11, even up to 13 gauge strings. We've got the custom set of pure vintage or American vintage 65 Fender Jaguar pickups in this guy. And when I say custom set, that's because these two are non-reverse wound, reverse polarity. They are supposed to do a really good job mimicking the bare knuckle pickups in Johnny Marr's actual guitar. Now, Johnny swears that, if you use non-reverse wound, reverse polarity pickups, that it makes the sound more focused, a little bit more resonant, even unplugged. Now, I cannot confirm or deny that. I cannot tell that much of a difference between them. But just know that when you have those, you're no longer hum canceling on your both pickups on position. There's still going to be a minor amount of 60 cycle hum. And as you know, on Jaguars, that's already not too bad. Definitely not as bad as compared to, say, a Fender Jazzmaster or a Jazzmaster that's got P90s in it. It's not going to be that bad. So, rounding it all out, we've got CTS and Switchcraft and Oak Grigsby electronics throughout. We've got an AVRI, tremolo, and arm. We've got the genuine Johnny Marr Jaguar or American Pro 7 1/4 radius bridge, and we've got the custom Marr plates. Everything else is all genuine Fender on this thing. Compare it to an actual Johnny Marr Jaguar. This is a Johnny Marr Jaguar. It used to be Olympic white. It's been refinished to mimic his Comet Sparkle, which is really just like a silver flake and hollow flake sparkle with tinted clear over it that gives it this champagne supernova kind of color. But yeah, how does it compare? These two are actually really similar. You've got two nitro finished necks. I somewhat actually like the neck on the custom built a little bit better because it's a satin finish. Some of these Johnny Marrs, I hate to say it, but I've had a couple of them now in my possession, done work on a couple, I've owned a couple, and they've all got this gloss neck. But more recent examples, for some reason, and I don't know if it's because maybe Fender hasn't allowed them to cure long enough, but the necks are sticky. And I typically will have to use a bit of steel wool or a Brillo pad and then polish them back up to get them to not be sticky anymore. And in fact, even on the newer Johnny Marr ones, you can still smell the fresh nitro lacquer on them when you break them out of the case. So that might give credence to my theory. The neck profiles on these are very, very similar. They are full C or medium C size necks. The Johnny Marr, what we've got here, goes from a 0.83 at the first fret down to 0.95 at the 12th fret, right? So that is a pretty chunky, and it's got kind of almost like an oval shape profile. I think that's how they've described them. So that makes it unique. This has been, shaped, custom shaped to Johnny Marr's actual 1965 Jaguar. And the neck, the Japanese neck on this one is quite similar. Now, instead of 0.83, it's almost like it's switched, right? Because this one is 0.85 at the first fret, and then at the 12th fret, it's 0.93. So this one is actually a little bit slimmer, right, at the 12th fret, whereas this one is a little bit thicker at the 12th fret. This one's a little bit thicker at the first fret, just a tiny bit, like 0.2 difference. So they're both nice full-size necks on them. They have the same kind of tuners, the Goto SD91s. That's what these come with. The Johnny Marrs come with stock, and that's the kind that I put on my custom builds. You can also see here that I've done the recessed switch mod. That's what Johnny has on his guitar. It makes it harder to accidentally engage or knock into these buttons. And yeah, all of the electronics are basically the same. The only way that this one's differed slightly, I add a little bit of variation to mine by making the second. Usually Johnny Marr guitars have two different bass cut switches over there, and mine have the bass cut switch that's universal for all the positions. And then the second one, instead of just being a bass cut switch for the series position, that's what's on Johnny's, on mine, it is a phase switch. So that's similar to what you find on the American Pro Jaguars. It gives you a Strat-like sound when your pickups are in series or in parallel with both pickups on. Pickups in this one are just ever so slightly hotter, coming in at about 6.25, right? The bridge pickup on this is right around that range too, about 6.15. It's at the neck pickups where they differ more. On the Johnny Marr, it's something like it's pretty low. It's like 5.5K output on the neck pickup of the Johnny Marr, whereas this one is like 6.2K. So that gives you a little bit more, little bit more beef in the neck position, and the neck position is my favorite position on most of my guitars, so that is a very welcome change. The only other thing too that's different on the custom build is the tremolo. Now, the Johnny Marr tremolos are basically just AVRI tremolos with a stay trem collet, or a stay trem license collet. It's not actually made by Stay Trem, but Stay Trem designed it, licensed it to Fender, and now Fender makes their own version, which unfortunately is not available as an aftermarket part. Good luck if you own a Johnny Marr Jaguar guitar and you lost your tremolo arm or something goes wrong with the collet, because it is incredibly difficult. I had put in an order for 2 missing arms that I had, and I ordered them about 3 months ago, and they're still not here. My Fender rep said that they literally have to pull them off the line because they do not make spare parts for the Johnny Marr Jaguar. So I have to wait for them to pull it off the line. Let's go ahead and break down the cost of parts before taxes, okay? So the body will come in, if you get this from Stratosphere, that's usually where I find it. These are about 160 bucks, the bodies, right? They're unloaded, they come unloaded, so there's nothing, it doesn't come with anything, okay? So that's an unloaded 160 bucks. So if we add now another 300 bucks for the neck with the tuners and the string tree, so now we're about 460 bucks. Go ahead and do the tremolo. That comes to 100. That's $560. The pickups, those come to about 140. So now we are at got $700 there. We've also got the custom plates. Those are going to come to about 75. So now we're at 775. You've got your Johnny Marr bridge. That's about 100. That's $875. Switches, I'm gonna go ahead and say that all of that stuff costs about $100. So $975. Then you do your taxes here in New York, it's 8.875% of $1,000, because that's basically where we were, $1,000. So 88 bucks. You're basically looking about at $1,100 here. And that is not including the costs of actually building out the guitar. Paying someone to put together your guitar, someone like myself, my rate is about $125 an hour. It usually takes me about 3-4 hours to put together a build like this, sometimes longer if there's something wrong. Everything is hand wired in here. The neck had to be, holes needed to be drilled, mounted. As I said before, we needed to install and align the tuners. All of that stuff, you know, that's going to cost money. And so if you calculate that now with your costs, if you do not know how to build a guitar yourself, right, or not willing to, or too scared to, like, you know, hunker down, get your hands dirty, put in a little elbow grease and a couple hours, if you're afraid to do that, right, and there's nothing to be afraid of if you're putting together this kind of build, because yeah, unless you don't know how to wire, you're not handy with a soldering iron, then yeah, if you're not willing to learn, you're not willing to practice, then yeah, go ahead and bring it to a tech, okay? But to assemble a guitar like this and set it up, do the work on the nut, get all those parts together and turn it into a well-playing guitar, it's gonna cost you probably another $300 or $400, especially if your tech is charging you by the hour. It's better, obviously, if you can get them to do a flat rate. Sometimes I'll do that if I know the scope of work that's going to be done. But yeah, I put in about probably $300, $400 maybe even 5 hours. So if we multiplied, and I was being honest about my bench rate and not just trying to come in at, you know, the price point that my client and I agreed to, then you'd be looking at a $1,500, $1,600 guitar. Now, a real Johnny Marr used, obviously not in this finish, but a real Johnny Marr used, if it's got dings and scratches, maybe it's missing its case, you can find those for, you know, right around that price, $1,600, $1,700, right? If you want the case, all the case candy, and it's in pretty good condition, expect to pay about $1,900 to $2,000. So maybe that $500 worth of savings, right, for someone who's strictly on a budget and can only spend that $1,400 or that $1,500, this is a very, very viable option for you. It's something that's fun, and maybe something that can help you actually learn how to put together your own guitars. Maybe after doing something like this, or doing a couple of these, maybe build a couple for your friends or whatever. If yours comes out awesome, but maybe from there you pick up one of the bodies that doesn't have all this stuff pre-drilled, and you learn how to actually align the tremolo, and you learn how to drill the holes for the neck. And you learn how to enlarge the holes for the thimbles. And you do what it takes to fit the neck without fucking up the finish around the neck. There's a lot of stuff, folks. There's a lot of stuff. And these are great gateways. Pretty easy beginner parts casters if you know how to do offset setups. You're handy with a soldering iron. And yeah, that's the build cost basically. You're going to come to about $1,100, maybe closer to $1,200. It depends really what you're putting in. If you're using a mastery bridge, if you're using Lawler pickups or antiquities or EP customs, that's going to increase the build cost. If you're crazy and you spend a bunch of money for $30 capacitors, Bourne's pots or whatever, locking tuners, all of that stuff is going to bring up your build cost, but you know, you bond with your guitar. You bond with your guitar. And that's why it's so hard for me to let any of these go when I build them, because they're so fantastic. You know, that's not just me blowing sunshine up my own ass here. They really do feel really good. And more times than not, they're lighter than the actual factory example. They're very, very resonant. The satin nitro necks feel amazing. And yeah, they just feel, I don't know, like that extra tender love and care was put into making this one instrument. I didn't have other instruments, you know, 7 other instruments that I had to build during this time. I just had this one. So that is the breakdown, my friends. I hope that kind of casts a light, especially because if I do sell these, if I put these out on the market and people are like, huh, he's charging like $1,300. Realize that if you find me selling one of these for $1,300, I've paid myself next to nothing, right? You're basically getting the guitar at the cost of parts with, I don't know, $200. That doesn't even cover, $200 doesn't even cover like a setup and like a full wiring job from me. So it's really just out of a labor of love that I make these guys, especially because I know how expensive guitars are these days. So anyway, keep an eye out. Don't forget to follow Totally Wired Guitars for more offset guitars building tips.